Hello, and welcome to the Logistics Management Podcast. My name's Jeff Berman. I'm Group News Editor for Logistics Management Magazine and also the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group. Today, it's a real pleasure to welcome Paul Tonsager to our podcast. Paul serves as the CEO and founder of Integrated Multi-Modal Solutions, LLC, where he advises companies and investors on building more efficient, resilient, and data-driven supply chains across global transportation networks. With more than 30 years of experience, Paul has held senior leadership roles at CN, Maersk, and Coyote Logistics. He served as head of procurement at Maersk, leading global sourcing and logistics strategy, and as vice president of intermodal at Coyote, where he focused on integrating rail and truck networks to improve service and performance. Earlier in his career, he led international expansion initiatives for CN, building and scaling logistics operations across Asia, and he later led a major restructuring of his global logistics business. Today, Paul works at the intersection of operations, technology, and capital, advising startups, private equity, and corporate leaders on logistics innovation, AI-driven decision making, and also how to translate technology into real operational performance. Hey, Paul, welcome to our podcast.
Jeff, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you on. Um, Paul, why don't we sort of start with the news of the day, if you will?
Mm.
Earlier today, the Union Pacific Railroad submitted an updated application regarding its proposed merger with Norfolk Southern. Obviously, a huge deal. We're talking in the neighborhood of 75 billion. Um, you know, this was an application that was rejected by the Surface Transportation Board earlier this year. So, what are your thoughts on sort of what they filed today? Where do you think things sort of go from here? And I guess, Paul, most importantly, what does this mean for rail and intermodal shippers?
It just came out, and I've got my chat bots all programmed, ready to go, fighting through I don't know what it is this time, 12,000 pages or 15,000
Yeah,
pages.
yeah.
But they've pretty much projected what this is going to look like. I think they got their hands, and I always say this up front. I'm a supporter of the merger. But I'm a
Hmm.
supporter of the merger if they can prove it's the right thing to do. And it's not just combining resources to increase shareholder value and all of those things. But I think the issue is going to become, and funny enough, I've just been in DC the last 2 days where this seemed to be a bit of the topic. Everybody knew it was going to come, but is this going to increase competition, and is this
Hmm.
going to be better for customers?
Right.
Certainly, the Surface Transportation Board, which will be the ultimate decider on this, takes this really seriously. And it's interesting because I mean they make the decision at the end of the day. It's certainly a little bit more weighted from a Republican perspective just because of Trump. But this period of time where the application was first put in January and where it is today, I just wrote a Substack on this last week. Is that 3 month time period now? You've got the elections coming up. More than likely, the Democrats will be taking control of the House, potentially the Senate. The conversation will change a bit. Where I think I said I believe this was a 60-40 deal when they first announced it,
Yeah.
and I think it's 50-50 now, and I think part of that has to do with the application. Not speed is everything with this, right? I mean, the slow moving wheels will attract more negative press, more questions, and things like that. And so I think they're a little bit behind the eight ball by having to resubmit this again. But again, I haven't been in it. I'll be really looking for specific OD pairs. They said they're going to convert 2.1 million trucks off the road and put it on the UP-NS when that's done. That's a lot. And, intermodal over the last 10 years, the CAGR was 2.5%.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about incredible growth. And then you got to match that up to the operating side. So there's a lot of work to do. And I call this consultant Lollapalooza because I don't know how much money everybody's going to spend on this to try and figure it out.
Yeah, no, 100%. So does that kind of leave well, they talk about, and you had just mentioned the 2.1 million truck conversion off the road over to their network, for example. Jim Vanna, the head of Union Pacific, has talked repeatedly about how this deal will ultimately enhance competition. From the perspective of the railroad and intermodal shipper, Paul, is it too early for them, do you think, to really have supportive buy-in, or is it more still of a wait and see approach?
If if I were a customer, I would wait and see, and I would ask a lot of questions. I would
Sure.
not. If you're a big shipper, again, I'm for it, but don't sit on the sideline. Don't just say okay. And I remember in past mergers, or when the railroads were being changed with PSR and all of that,
Hmm.
customers like, I can't wait to ask questions. Well, okay. When the opportunity came, I turned to them and said, why don't you ask any questions? And they're like, because I'm afraid of the fallout.
Yeah.
And that's not the right thing. But I do think there's going to be part of that on here. And this is nothing against Mr. Venna or the UP or BN or whatever. You can't. Customers will go, if I say too much and this goes through, what does that mean for me? I guess it's human nature a bit.
Hmm.
But what I would say is the STB will give a forum for people to speak, both for and against. And my real thing for intermodal shippers is if I'm going from Kansas City to Cincinnati, today you've got two railroads you've got to be on, two bills of lading, two invoices, two. This should create an environment where it's one. And from an operating perspective, will these be run through trains and not go through Chicago? I know they're talking about that, but the real value is a run through train and one invoice and
Yes.
and one set of rules, one set of tariffs, one set of accessorials. And then people can plan against that a bit. If it falls short of that, then the value I think disappears a bit.
Okay. Okay. Good points. Shifting to more just a industry perspective, Paul, when we look at sort of the current state of service and volumes for both rail carload and intermodal, how would you sort of assess where things stand year to date? I mean, there are definitely, when you look at the AAR data, for example, and some of the IANA data, it does look like things are fairly healthy at the moment.
Yes, but you have to ask why. And the why is fuel.
Hmm.
And the why is that rail now has become cheaper than truck. Not the better service, but cheaper.
Okay.
And so I believe in intermodal. I spent most of my career around it. I believe in it. But you still got to prove it. And using rail is a heck of a lot harder than calling up your local trucker, who you probably know, by the way, because most
Right.
of them are mom and pop or three or four or five, six trucks. Come get my load. Okay. One invoice again, one person you're dealing with. Rail intermodal is complicated. And the other piece of it is, certainly if you are a shipper, a BCO, beneficial cargo owner, you're working through an intermediary. You're working from a
Mhm.
domestic perspective. You're working through Hub and Hunt. From an international perspective, you're working through Maersk or Costco, for example. So you're really relying on third parties to be able to manage your freight and do all of those things. Their visibility tools are good and things like that, but the reality is, have railroads and these IMCs and steamship lines put in the processes that will make this sustainable. So when fuel spikes again or goes down, which it will, I mean, it might not be tomorrow, but 2 years from now, we still might, be the much lower diesel fuel price.
Hmm.
Do they have in place systems and the philosophy of maintaining this business over the long haul, not just because they're getting a spike. And EDL is also playing into it, right? For sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
The English, but these are things that are outside that are making this occur. It's not something the railroads or these IMCs have done on something totally changed where this freight is coming to them.
Right, understood. And then, this is all happening at a time when we're dealing with significantly rising fuel prices related to the Iran conflict. And, in terms of intermodal gaining share as a result of what's happening in the Middle East, we see it every Tuesday when the Energy Information Administration issues their weekly diesel prices.
Yeah.
They continue to be consistently, high 550s per gallon, that is. Um, what needs to happen, resulting to that to help drive increased intermodal share?
Well, and I, it sound a little bit hard on everybody in the rail industry and things, but I mean, they're all professional, and it's like anything else. You're motivated by your KPIs, either your own internal KPIs or what the company's put on you. And certainly from a rail perspective, carload business is high margin business, 50% margin business. Intermodal is 77, 78, 23, 24% margin business.
Hmm.
And railroads, certainly, if you look at over the last 10, 20 years, they've been rewarded by operating ratio. And that operating ratio, they want around 60 or 61. And so no matter how hard you put in systems in place or you make it much easier for the customer, you're going to butt up against that number. And if you go to 65, the market will penalize you for it. I mean,
Hmm.
just listen to all the analyst calls. I mean, it was
Of
all
course.
about your OR. So getting back to your question, are they going to be able to capitalize on this? It becomes a pricing question. And the other piece of it is, in a steamship environment, you have 10% of your vessel overseas that goes to the spot market, sold overseas. You got a week for the rate. Nobody in the intermodal space has that type of dynamic pricing to be able to do things like that over
Yeah.
a long period of time. And so it becomes a lot harder to get stickiness with those customers.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. Um, and do you think that's part of the reason that there is slower intermodal adoption relative to truckload? This how you're talking about the lack of rate stickiness, for example?
And again, it gets back to ease of business. The reality is, and this is, intermodal's been around 40 years, but as soon as box cars and warehouses started getting built with truck, areas where trucks would park instead of the rail and all of that, you've kind of lost a bit of it right there because everybody's infrastructure is set up around trucking and it's not set up around rail. I wouldn't say everybody, but
Okay.
that's kind of how things went. So how do you go back now and put that genie back in the bottle? And it becomes it's difficult. But I do think that with ED, and I think the other big piece of this is the insurance piece. How many truckers are going to be able to do over $1 million worth of insurance? And I know at Maersk, we wouldn't, at least 3 4 years ago, we wouldn't look at carriers that were under $1 million worth of had under $1 million worth of
Yeah.
insurance to move our freight. So how do all of these things play into moving people to want to do intermodal and get it stickiness? It's hard. It's hard. But I do think this pricing situation and are we in intermodal? Are we out intermodal? Are we in intermodal? Are we out in from intermodal? From a management perspective,
Hmm.
also
Hmm.
doesn't help because Amazon wants consistency. They don't want up and down.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And speaking of Amazon, Paul, it's really hard not to notice how it continues to grow and expand its shipping and logistics presence and operations in a whole bunch of different ways. For example, the 4 billion it's committed to invest in rural routes, taking
Yeah.
more control of its deliveries,
Yeah.
sort of the planned breakup, if you will, of USPS, United States Postal Service, and Amazon. There's a lot of moving parts, obviously. With all that said, how would you sort of gauge or assess how Amazon is doing so far on the shipping and logistics front? And what do shippers need to know when considering moving their freight via Amazon?
They are incredibly sophisticated. They're a platform, and I think maybe we even talked about this, but
Yeah.
certainly the USPS, their whole, to me, that's their moat was rural, because the expense of having to recreate what they do is high. But Amazon has the wherewithal and the desire to do things like that and the money. We got to remember, 10 years ago, they weren't making any money. It was just let's spend, let's spend, let's spend.
Yeah.
Now, certainly that's changed a bit, but they're juggernaut. But again, they're a platform. They are a professional logistics platform. And so every move they make, I mean, think about the visibility they have over everybody else, because they control the freight.
Hmm.
So they are controlling it from the time they pick it up, maybe overseas. They're the one, everybody talks about visibility from a technology perspective. And you can always talk to people that are in that space or selling. And I said, so what does visibility mean to you? And sometimes I get an answer, sometimes, well, it's a hedge. Don't deal with people like that, or don't spend the money on it. The only real true visibility would be in Amazon, because they control the chain of custody from beginning to end.
Hmm.
There aren't a lot of customers that do that. So there's some things to learn from them, and they're just going to get better. I mean, I get ticked off now because I see that Amazon truck at my house twice a day. I don't want them to be that efficient.
Right, right. Yeah. Makes it too easy as a consumer, right?
Yeah, I'm like, don't come here. Don't come here.
Yeah, no, I get that. Um, so let's move over to tariffs and global trade for a few minutes, Paul. Obviously the tariff uncertainty remains firmly intact. We have the Section 122 tariffs that were implemented by the White House following the Supreme Court decision in February ruling against the legality of the IEEPA tariffs and how they were implemented without congressional approval. Now we also have the ongoing Section 301 and 232 investigations as well, and refunds. You can't forget about that. That's fairly recent development. So, all that said, all these different tariff buckets in the air, if you will, what steps can shippers take in order to really navigate the current trade environment, given all the perpetual, or what feels like perpetual uncertainty on the trade front?
I think the unsung heroes, or whatever are customs brokers. If you have not, and you have to have a license. There's quite a few things you have to jump through to get that license, as you should. But if you don't have a really good customs broker that can help you manage this process of tariffs, and you're like, I'm just going to tap it into ChatGPT and see what it comes up, you're not doing yourself a service, because it
Yeah.
is incredibly complicated and the ball moves all over the place all the time. So you need professional people to help you do that. Either internally, you hire people, or you go out and use your local broker or something like that. But beyond that, I think I'm a free trader to heart, so I was disappointed by all of this. I mean, we kind of knew it was going to happen,
Hmm.
but I think the fever has broken a bit. That you're not going to have. I think he's moved on. The president has moved on to other things, the
Hmm.
war in or Iran, for example. But I think he's moved on to other things. The Supreme Courts have ruled, the courts have held, they've done the right thing. So I think this up and down won't be as dramatic as it's been over the last 6 months. What I will tell you, though, is, in my lifetime, the Democrats were always the ones that were against free trade, and the Republicans were for free trade.
Right.
Now that the Democrats are getting more than likely going to take power in the House and maybe the Senate, if we think that these tariffs are going to get rolled back anytime soon, they're not. So I think the positive thing is we kind of know where we are with these tariffs. Are they going to get rolled back? I'd suspect not. And get a really good customs broker to kind of help you through that. But I think this period of unknown has passed a bit, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. And just a few more quick ones, Paul. We can kind of approach these in a bit of a rapid fire format, if you don't mind.
No
You
worries.
with the baseball season underway, it got me thinking about AI in terms of where AI implementation within logistics and freight transportation and supply chain stands. From that perspective, what inning do you think we're in relative to the great advent of AI within our industries?
I am a huge technology skeptic, but one who's been kind of, I use it a lot for different things. But I think that the reality is we're probably in the second or third inning.
Okay.
I think that the problem is that most enterprise accounts look at this as like, oh my gosh, I've got to invest all this money. I got to do all these things. I've got these platforms. I have an issue with CIOs because this is not really their skill set. They're more platform SAP based. But the reality is, if I'm an operator, like on a railroad, and I've got somebody does speech to text and I'm walking down the tracks doing inspections, that's AI generated. You do the prompts and things like that. Maybe that's all you need. You don't
Sure.
need to do everything. Tax accrual. I mean, there's so many specific things that you can do that can get immediate results. And I think the people that sell the technology and the buyers of technology still think, oh my gosh, if I do this, this has got to be a huge thing. The other thing is, as well as anybody, if your data is not clean, you're starting from scratch with your new data too. So anytime when in my career they say we're getting a new SAP or something, we're going to go through integration. There was not one person that went, oh, is that really going to help me? AI in the right form and using it targeted can help certain functions. I do think at the end of the day, the last people standing in any kind of major way will be revenue producers because I've never seen AI in our industry be able to actually go out and sell. And so I
Yeah.
was telling younger people that are trying to get in, I said, go into sales, become a revenue producer because you're one of the last people to let go. But it'll be interesting. Everybody will be on their own journey. I think if you don't understand it or haven't taken a couple classes in it, you're not doing yourself a service. But like I said, I think we're probably bottom of the third.
Okay. Yeah. Fair. Yeah. Long way to go in that game, to say the least.
Yeah.
Um, oh yeah, and a couple other things here, Paul. But before we started recording, you had mentioned how we had talked a bit about cargo theft. It's become a huge national logistics topic, global as well. We've seen many examples of it, especially in recent months. Probably the most notable one was the $400,000 hike or theft of lobster from a Costco. I can't
Yeah.
remember which Costco or where it was. Uh, as someone living here in Maine, I can assure
Yeah.
you that is one heck of a lot of lobster.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd just like to hear your thoughts on sort of the current state of cargo theft and freight fraud as it relates to efforts being made on the Hill and throughout industry to combat it. What needs to happen to really get rid of it, to face it head on? What can be done there?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, well, shoot, I started my career in Miami with Maersk. And back then it was car theft, right? I mean, all these cars going down, used cars going down to the Caribbean and down to South America, and
Hmm.
you couldn't control it until you got LoJack or you got GPS, and I guess it's still going on. Criminals will figure out a way, and I think that the key is where are like in the chain of custody, where are the holes? And certainly people are trucking from the port to intermodal or to different rail terminals. They're changing their routing patterns. They're going from the West Coast to the East Coast. Memphis has been a problem. There are a lot of people, drones, high-level consultants, security, and things like that. But I also think if there's a will, there's a way with this. That it's going to be. You're never going to get rid of all of it. I think you mitigate it by just changing things up quite a bit. But you do re-engineer that supply chain, going back on documents and things like that. I mean, I've heard that there's RFD tags being placed into these, and certainly with technology and cameras out there that are public information, you can figure out what flat car that container's going on and then target it. Fortunately, not that I know of. I mean, they're stopping trains and cutting brake lines and all of those things. That's not safe. I mean, a box of Nikes or whatever is one thing, but you guns and the whole bit. It's like the old West. There are certainly a lot of efforts from a federal perspective. I think technology will help this a bit, but it's one of those things that you just need to be really diligent on and change things up all the time. Certainly Microsoft, when they were sending cargo over, they realized that their cargo was wrapped in plastic, and so you could see it. They changed it to do more, paper or brown paper on it, so people can't go, oh, you know. So it continues to be a problem. I think Memphis and some of these intermodal terminals, you got to pull the trains in. There's things that you can do. You break them up, but they know what they're doing. So I always suspect it's near the source where a lot of this information is coming from.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's there is a bill working through the House. I know it's I can't tell. I believe it's called the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, i.e. Corca, which is I think it moved out of a House committee in January, and it's now I don't know where in the actual process it is. But it looks very promising. It has the support of a lot of industry organizations. Think like the Association of American Railroads,
Yeah.
American Trucking Associations, IANA, National Retail Federation. So a lot of big, important organizations are throwing their support behind this legislation. So hopefully that can drive some traction on this front as well.
Yeah, I would say though, Jeff, real quick, I think the other piece of this that is certainly a bit underreported, maybe not. But I work with a couple of these startups that are looking at returns, right?
Yeah,
And there's taking them to a central warehouse, but certainly there's no way to see if it's iPhones or toilet paper in the box. And people have become pretty sophisticated at that as well. I mean, I look at that as theft. And you don't really know until it gets to the warehouse and your custody, again, your custody has been cut, your chain of custody. And I think Amazon said it's $15 billion a year to them or something like that. But that's another area that if you look at cost of doing business, it's not as dramatic as
yeah.
the trains, but it's a problem.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. It's definitely going to be require a lot of attention going forward.
Yeah,
Two more quick ones, Paul.
sure.
Later this summer, well, we're still in the spring. Coming this summer, will be the USMCA renegotiations. There's been a lot of attention on this, and I'm certain there will be more post Memorial Day as we get much closer to that target date, which I believe is late June, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on USMCA in terms of its effectiveness, one, and I guess the second one just being its future, its fate. What could happen here? I mean, there's a lot of speculation that it could just turn into two separate trade deals, like U.S. Canada, U.S. Mexico, as opposed to its current incarnation. A lot of unknown there.
A lot of unknown, but we should be thankful that this is being negotiated now and it wasn't a year ago.
Yeah.
I get back to the fever breaking a bit. I think the president has, there's so many things going on in the world. I think well, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but he's taken his flesh a bit.
Hmm.
I think that Canada and Mexico have got to watch their P's and Q's. Is that a right thing? I don't know. But you got to realize who you're negotiating with. I think it would be a tragedy if it didn't come to. I think there's certain things that even the technology front, intellectual property rights and things like that, that they need to probably negotiate a little bit harder. But we are all connected, and we've built it that way. And it's going to be rough. It's going to be, people are going to complain, and you're going to hear it in the press, and the Canadians are going to complain. The US will complain. The Mexicans will complain. I think that they will come up with some term. I would be surprised if it wasn't a tri-party agreement, but certainly Scheinbaum in Mexico has been a little bit more friendly to Trump or the president. What does that mean? He takes a lot of this personally. So, certainly P's and Q's, which I mentioned earlier, hopefully everybody kind of plays that game a bit before we lead up to this.
Yes.
The Canadians actually did a really smart thing the last go. I mean, they figured out what each one of these states did and went down to county level, targeted Republican Congress people, and figured out what kind of trade they did with these specific states or counties, and said, and equated it to jobs. If we don't do this, you're going to lose this many jobs in your district.
Right.
And I thought that was very smart. I don't know if you can do that today, but there is an impact.
Yeah, no doubt. That's interesting. And then just the final question here, Paul, was just yesterday, the Federal Reserve again paused their current borrowing rate, remains at 3.5% to 3.7%. That's where it stood going back to its last four meetings. I guess this was largely expected when you look at everything going on with the run up in energy prices, inflation concerns, tariffs, a whole bunch of different things in that bucket. Just wondering what your thoughts are on the Fed's action and perhaps future actions with a new chair, Kevin Warsh, coming in terms of what it could mean for freight transportation, supply chain, logistics operations, things like that.
You're asking me an economist question, which I'm not too good at. But I think we didn't even know what the Fed was. Interest rates were 18% of this. We didn't even know what it was.
Sure.
It got broken with Reagan and all of that. I do believe that inflation is if you talk to people on the street, as you do, inflation is the killer. I mean, and you've got to do whatever it takes to break it. And I frankly think they lowered it too soon last go around. Again, I'm not an economist, but I think that from a transportation perspective, the fuel situation is one that's driving a lot more than the interest rate one. I mean, if you break down the commodities outside of intermodal that rail moves, vehicles certainly play into that. But the big oil, the oil, the grains, all the big products that they move, how much does that play into the interest rate, and how much more does it play into the value of currency and where you sit? So I frankly, and I'll leave you with this, I actually think the board is human, and they're like, you're not going to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
I think we're there a bit, which is unfortunate. That's why they need to stay independent. I'll put my politics hat on there a bit. So I think it's worth a watch, but I do, I just saw today, I think inflation spiked up, or, gross domestic product didn't go up as high as people thought. The war throws a lot into this. How long is it going to last? So I think it's something, stay tuned, but you're never going to get down to 0% again. I mean, that's just not going to happen, or 1%.
Agreed.
And hopefully it doesn't go back up to 8 or 9. So I think we're kind of in a new normal where 2.5, 3%, it's like we were talking about tariffs. I think we're kind of in an area now where the floor is maybe stabilized a little bit with some of those indicators.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, look, Paul, this brings us to the end of our allotted time for today's podcast. So, on behalf of Logistics Management Magazine and the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group, I'd just like to say thanks for spending some time with us today.
Jeff, a pleasure.
Yeah,
Very much.
absolutely. I look forward to having you on again in the future. And for
Anytime.
Great. And for those listening in, please check out Paul on LinkedIn. He's got a really good presence there. Simply linkedin.com/IN backslash P Tonsager, and that's PTONSAGER, followed by another backslash. Paul also has a Substack. And Paul, I'm going to just turn back to you for a minute. If you could just tell us a little bit about it, where people can check it out, etc.
Yeah, it's been interesting for me. I write an article called Signals and Switches, which I started out more as a rail kind of articles, but now I'm kind of diving into a little bit more management and things like that. But
Okay.
I'm very honest with what I write. People, I actually appreciate when people disagree with me. So check it out.
Yeah, great, great. And also for those of you on Twitter, please go ahead and give us at Logistics Management a follow, simply at Logistics MGMT. And also, if you're not subscribed to our podcast, I please encourage you to do so. Just simply punch in the Logistics Management Podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and it will pop right up. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day. And we'll catch up with you real soon.